it'd be a good idea to close it. All right. Well, however, what do you think, Raj?
Yeah, closing is good, yeah. It doesn't matter to me. But,
Okay, well, welcome to Sunday morning at the Marxist Library. My name is Gene Rule, and I call myself the General Secretary since I do all the mailing and make the coffee. Wonderful day today. I understand things are not quite this rosy in China. There's some reports I heard this morning of chaos there. The shops are closed, banks are closed, even government offices. A lot of people are leaving to the countryside. And then adults are just sitting in their houses, drinking, gambling. Children are wandering the streets asking for money. They even set lions loose. We call it chaos. The media calls it chaos. And here in China, they call it Chinese New Year. So I want to welcome everybody to the Year of the Rat. I hope it's a good year for everybody. And we have a very good way to start it out here. You probably all know my rap on the Marxist Library since you're here, so I won't make that rap. I'll just turn it over to Charles, one of our longtime and trusted members, to introduce our speaker.
Raj Sahai has lived in India, lived in the United States, but more important is his view that he's lived in two modes of production and he's fighting for a third. And history is made struggle by strugglers. Probably where things are pretty fierce here right now. Hold on for this one with us today. We'll have about an hour talking and hold your questions and comments until after that. We'll have a short break, and then we'll have discussion.
thanks, Charles. So, thank you for coming. Hope this will be worthwhile your time and effort to come here. So I'll start by just reading you a few lines of the preamble to the Constitution of India. And it actually borrows a lot from the American Constitution. When it was written in 1949, then it was amended several times. I think 47 times. It has 47 amendments. The US Constitution has 27. It says, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, liberty of thought, justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and unity and integrity of the nation." Now, this 42nd Amendment is what added sovereign socialist words to secular democratic, which was secular democratic to begin with in 49. But they added, this was in 1976, right after Indira Gandhi's emergency in 1975, which really had a huge opposition happening, which was following the war in which India broke up Pakistan into Bangladesh, which used to be part of Pakistan. So this preamble, of course, preamble is not legally enforceable, neither in US nor Indian. It's the Constitution that's enforceable. But preamble is important still. Sorry about that. It's totally nonsensical call, and I'm going to turn it off right now. Okay. I'm going to assume most of you are familiar with my previous talk, but you may not be. I'll cover a little bit of what I covered, otherwise I cannot deliver it. So what I want to talk about is BJP's rise to power briefly, and primarily the talk is on Modi's second term, which started just about a year ago. BJP now has 303 out of 545 members in parliament. So it has a majority, complete majority. And with its allies, which are regional parties, it is over 350. but that is short of two-thirds majority. That's very critical because you need two-thirds majority to amend the constitution. Indira Gandhi had it in 76, mainly because of the Bangladesh war. Huge support came to her. Upper house, there is also India also an upper house called Rajya Sabha that has 245 members, of which 233 are elected by the state assemblies of India. They send those people there by election. And 13 are nominated by the president. These are intellectuals, artists, and so forth. And but the upper house has to, both houses make laws, but the upper house has to ratify the law made by parliament. So BJP cannot change the constitution, given that it doesn't even have two-thirds majority in parliament, and in Rajya Sabha it's less than half. Congress Party, which led the independence movement and was formed in 1885, was almost the sole party which governed the country until 1980s, almost 90, actually past 90, but used to be vast, huge majority, almost the sole party. They had other parties, but it had a tremendous majority. Is reduced now to 52 seats. The left front, which has both the communist parties, and there's another front, which is also like them, another party, is garnered only 5 votes out of 545. This is their lowest in terms of electoral politics. The highest was 59 in 2004. Now, a little bit about, in this talk, I should tell you a little bit about the Muslims of India and the caste system. When India was divided, the Muslims had a choice, and obviously it's a terrible choice. I mean, to move from one part to another doesn't make sense for most people. Their lives are, they were born, raised, their grandparents and everything. So, but some Muslims did move, but most Muslims did not move. There was 1 million or 2 million or maybe 3 million exchange of population when Pakistan was formed. Pakistan was formed on the basis of the movement that said Muslims need a country of their own, otherwise they will be dominated by Hindus. Hindus form a big majority in India. So the Muslim population is about 14.2% in India. It's not very large, but it's more than 10%. Now, the upper castes, which have traditionally allied and ruled everybody through long period, thousands of years, more than 1,000, almost 2,000 years, they have been in the ruling class, are the 3 top castes. And they together form about 20%. These are round numbers, so these are not precise. I just, for ease of presentation, I made them round. Then there are the middle castes. They're called other backward castes. They're called other backward castes, but they are the middle castes. They are about 35%. Then the Sikhs and Christians form 3 and 2%, so together 5. And there are few others like Zoroastrians, which are called Parsis in India, and Jains, Jews. Altogether, they're less than 0.5%. So about 5 to 5.5% are these. Then there are the Dalits and tribals. Tribals are the people who live in nature, in forests, etc. They are completely considered people of nature. You kind of like Native Americans here. Similar thing. They constitute about 8 to 9% of the population, and together with the Dalits, which are the lowest of the caste, and actually considered by Hindu society as outside the caste, but they are roughly at the lowest part of the. So they also say we're outside, we're not Hindus. So Dalits and tribals together form 25%. So together they're actually higher than the upper caste. Okay. So in any electoral strategy, the crucial vote is the OBCs, other backward caste, or the middle caste, which is about 35%. Also Sikhs and Christians. And these are middle class castes who are petty property owning and middle income block of voters. So the fight is over that. just like the fight was over the middle peasant in a Russian revolution. Now, this is not revolutionary, this is just bourgeois politics. But bourgeois politics in India is more complicated and different than the United States. So in 2019 election, BJP garnered 37% of overall vote. Am I still, you still hear me? Okay. Its distribution was this. BJP got 60% of upper caste vote. Not surprised, because BJP is basically a conservative, backward-looking, although they present themselves as modernist, but they are actually a reaction. I'll go into that a little bit. They garnered 40% of the OBC's middle caste votes, so that's important. They even got 35% of the Dalit votes. Well, that's complicated. That's how complicated this politics is. But only 8% of the Muslim votes, because they are definitely anti-Muslim. Okay, and that's because their parent body, RSS, which stands for National Volunteer Corps, but actually that's their ideological parent, and they don't fight elections. They have 57,000 branches, a party that was formed in 1925, and which actually patterned after the philosophy and ideology of Italian fascism. Okay. So now Modi came in the first term promising development for all, kind of a liberal thing. He's backed by media, his charismatic personality, and he won that election because the opposition was fractured. There were previous government was Congress-led last 10 years, and because in 1991 India moved to neoliberal economics. In other words, they invited foreign corporations to come and invest in India and exploit Indian workers, copying China. They thought they would be the next China. But that didn't quite happen. And but the Indian bourgeoisie, which was rising under Congress party, by the way, the Indian Constitution is a what I would say social democratic constitution, but it's actually a bourgeois constitution because it allows private property in production and exploitation of people. So what in the first term Modi did, Modi came with not actual majority by his own party. He came along with his allies, which are regional parties. One of them is like them, the Shiv Sena, but others are just regional. They have like the Sikh, Akali Dal represents Sikhs, mostly Sikhs. There are other parties, they're associated this from the south. They came to power with them, but they didn't have a majority. Now, these other parties, except for one, is not for their agenda of Hindutva. Hindutva is their ideology, okay? This ideology, as I said, is kind of fascist ideology. Okay, I'll move along. So the reason of this victory of Modi in the second term, in the first term they introduced demonetization. I got a taste of it because I was in India when it happened. And I had money in my pocket, and all the big notes were demonetized. And all of a sudden, I just couldn't spend it. And so I was saved by, women, housewives of different family members, and because they always stash away some small notes, because they spend the money buying grocery stuff. So what demonetization did in 2016 was basically destroyed India's natural economy. Natural economy means the small producers who grow vegetables or something, they make something and sell it. There's no accounting. They just exchange money, cash, and the big bills are still used. And all of a sudden, everything came. They were crashing for them because, they live on small margins. Everything was chaotic. Banks couldn't cash it. Even the banking people died of heart attacks working on it. Okay. Anyway, they also introduced, so they destroyed that, and that really harmed. The unemployment rose. Then they also introduced a single centralized value-added tax instead of various different kinds of taxes. Idea was good, but the way they brought it together also added to the disruption. Unemployment grew. 60% of the college graduates, by the time second election came about in February of last year, were not finding jobs after graduation. This is college graduates. Environment pollution, of course, was getting worse. It just continued to get worse. Okay, so why did Modi win with this situation? That's a good question. Okay, there was a question mark. First of all, the opposition was split and could not develop common minimum program, common platform. Second was corruption. Many of the old opposition leaders were known to be corrupt. And Congress Party was having fifth generation leading it. And the whole point is it's dynastic policies, despotic by, and Rahul Gandhi, was grandson of Nehru, is kind of off the wall at times. It's just not a charismatic leader. Modi is charismatic person. He wears clothing, showy, and his hands are flailing, and he's a very good orator. What he's saying, if you, as an intellectual, you would not like, but for a common man, he appeals because he promises things that they think that they're going to transform India into the United States if he was given 10 years, that kind of stuff. The other reason for his second victory was there was a terrorist incident in Kashmir where a suicide vest wearing SUV driving guy loaded with TNT, high grade, rammed into a soldier's bus, the transport carrier. 40 died. There are reasons to believe this may not have been quite so innocent. We don't know the answer, but there are reasons to suspect, just like 911, this may have been intelligence agencies' jobs to kind of create. And then jingoism developed. And Modi immediately took a risky move to go and bomb deep inside Pakistan what he called was a terrorist training camp. And that is also debatable, but perhaps it was. And then the Pakistan came back and bombed, and 2-3 day thing happened, everybody stopped. But what it served its purpose. The jingoism gave rise to, Modi is the muscular man who can save India and all that, just like what happened with George Bush. The other was they use religious jingoism, which is part of their ideology. Okay, so RSI ideology basically says this is a Hindu nation. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Christian, you can be a Jew, you can do all that, but acknowledge this is a Hindu country. Now you can see the repercussions. What it means. It means is you're immediately an outsider by implication. You are living in the terms of the Hindus. Okay, so this is the right-wing thing. Okay, now there is an increasing language of violence in all this period, the first period, the second period. One person who comes to power, his name is Amit Shah. He's the Home Minister, which is the second most important government position in power. Okay, this is like Home Minister. There is no equivalent in the United States for that position. He was accused of assassination, political assassination, in 2002 Gujarat riots. Okay, and there was then my home state of UP, which has over 200 million people, one state, it's the largest state in India, is now ruled by a Mahant, which is a priest. Okay, but he's priest in name only. Okay, he uses violent language. Okay, and never in history, Hindu religion has its own problems. Circular caste system is a big problem. It's not a kind religion to many people, right? He would say something like, anybody who comes out and dishonors the flag, we will take care of them. We will make sure they pay for it. Things like that. Sometimes even more overt than that. And so the police is in centers now, which is in Delhi. Police function is in India is by state. And Delhi, however, is a national territory. So this is language of violence is going on. And then there is violence has been used to consolidate this power. Okay, started with 1992 demolition of what was known as the Babri Masjid or Babri Mosque in the city called Ayodhya, which means no war. That's the name of the city. It means the city of peace. And this was a movement, a kind of right-wing, I call it fascist movement, that accomplished it. So that starts with violence. 2002, there was a communal conflict in Gujarat, which was triggered by a fire in a railway compartment which had Hindu pilgrims. It was blamed on Muslims. Whether they did it or not, it's not clear. Most probably they didn't do it. It was some accident that killed 59 people. And then in response to that, with the backing of the state government, at that time, Modi was the chief minister, which is equivalent to governor here. There was a tremendous conflict that arose with their help, and the police was held back in times, and over 1,000 people died. Vast majority of them being, 80% of them being Muslims. Okay, so, and then in 2014 to 19, this is the period in which Modi's first term, which ended a year ago, there were attacks on secular public intellectuals. 5 well-known historians, journalists, authors were murdered because they by their work established the falsity of their ideology. They were murdered, and people don't know who murdered them. And they still haven't found them. Okay, and then there was cow vigilantism. Hindus believe cow is sacred. Okay, now and so now cow all of a sudden, if you're driving and the cows are in the road and you happen to touch it, my God, your life may be in danger in India. So if you go there visiting, be careful. Intimidation of leftist students. Now, in the first term I'm talking about, JNU, Jawahar Lal Nehru University, is a equivalent of Yale and Harvard in India, except it's public. And 40% of students it takes by its own methodology from very poor households around the country, and gives them full scholarships, including living and all that. And so they literally, and so this actually generates public intellectuals, people of the leftists. And they obviously, students are drawn towards idealism. Leftism is their first call, right? Some generalized leftism. And so they targeted the student union president, whose name is Kanhaiya Kumar. Some of you may have seen his videos. He's very good orator, and very, he did a PhD from there. But they accused him of sedition by English law, which is still on the books, and booked him. And when he went to the court, he was attacked by the lawyers of the right wing to beat him up in the court. And he escaped that. And then he was in jail, and the court, of course, said, there's no evidence here. And of course, Indian law doesn't allow, Supreme Court has ruled, even if you say India should be broken to pieces, that doesn't form sedition. There has to be an act that actually publicly, materially demonstrates that you have done something or incite riots or something like that. Just saying that India should be divided into 5 regions is not. Supreme Court has made it clear, so the court let him go. But they were using this basically for intimidation. And he was not the only student. There was a Muslim students, 2 Muslims, 1 woman and 1 man. All 3 were. To this day, they didn't bring it back to the court, but they use it in campaigns to say, well, they raise these leftists are with the terrorists. That's what they say. Then there is organized violence that happened in the second term, right after second term at JNU, same institution, and where leftist students and faculty were beaten up by goons who were brought in with the connivance of the administration. And by the way, the VC, the vice chancellor, which is the president equivalent, which is designated by the central government, by Modi government, he's totally was in it. Shamelessly, he allowed them to come in, and they beat him. They broke open the head of the JNU Student Union president, a woman, tiny woman of 22, 23, 24, and also a professor, a woman professor, and others were beaten up. And this, while the Delhi police was called, and they stood outside, they didn't interfere. And when they filed a charge, they filed against the victims, not against this. This is the police that Amit Shah controls in the center. This reminds me of Berlin police in 1919 when Rosa Luxemburg was killed. And police shot and killed dead 22 protesters in my hometown of Lucknow, which is the capital of UP, where this yogi, the priest, rules. His police shot and killed 22 protesters, many more wounded. So this is increasing violence, violent language, increasing violence. Okay, so now Modi's right-wing agenda implementation, second. One was the Article 370, abrogation of Article 370, which gave Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, which is a state called Jammu and Kashmir, not just Kashmir, and it's historically formed that way for a long time. They removed the article, which means they then were no longer have any kind of autonomy. And not only they reorganized it, they broke away a section which was where Buddhists are majority, but although it's a small population, it's a very large area. It borders with both Pakistan and China. That's called Ladakh. It's a very high altitude place. It's 14,000 and above feet. And they downgraded both of them to union territories, which means it's ruled directly by center, called president's rule, but in effect it's the BJP rule. And Amit Shah controls the police there now, the home minister, the guy who accused of murder and who organized this, I think who let these goons go in and so forth. Then there is opposition leaders are all under detention for the last 6 months. They still are, okay? They blocked the internet. They sent additional forces. Essentially, they brought the economic situation in Jammu and Kashmir to a halt, okay? The economy is suffering, people are suffering. Now, even bigger than that is 3 other things they did. One is the Citizens Amendment Act, which is worth a whole lecture, but I'm going to try and cover it shortly. Now, they introduced a bill, and that was passed by the majority because they control in parliament, and they also got approval in the Rajya Sabha, interestingly, which makes people who are coming as refugees, or in any way they are coming to India from 3 countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, who are either Hindu, Sikhs, Christians, Parsis, Jains, etc., Jews. And these countries are Islamic, they have Islamic constitution, they have blasphemy laws, and people are. But the problem here is this. So they said, well, they will get in expedited citizenship, fast-track citizenship, okay? But it leaves out Muslims. Well, they say, well, Muslims, these are Muslim countries. Why should you have it? Well, there's a problem. Because Muslims who are not quite the main sect of these countries are also oppressed. Shias are more attacked than Hindus in Pakistan. Okay, they burned their mosques. And Shias form about 10% of Muslim population of Pakistan. The Ahmadiyas are another sect. And there are others. So it is a run around the constitution. Secular constitution, but they said, well, what are you doing? Why are you worried about Muslims of India? Don't need to worry because this is about people who are oppressed from there. We're bringing them in. So it is discriminatory and intentional violation. Its appeal is pending in the Supreme Court, but if anybody thinks courts can decide and block movement of fascism, you already know that doesn't happen. Even in here, Vietnam War, many people thought we could appeal to Supreme Court of the United States and stop this terrible war. No, it doesn't happen. So Then the other thing associated with why it is threatening to a Muslim majority is something called National Register of Citizens. Okay. Now there was a Citizenship Act in 1955 that said whoever is living in India is Indian citizenship, or if your parents if you are of Indian citizenship, you're a citizen. And with the only provision that they changed in 2003 that if it came illegally, one of your parents came illegally, then it doesn't give you a right to be a citizen automatically. Not unlike here. So the Congress Party, although this law was there before 2004 to 13, Congress Party did not implement it. Okay, they did not bother with it. But when Modi-led BJP came to power in 2014, they began to implement it. Okay, now all of a sudden, you have to prove your citizenship. So I know in a democratic country, you elect, you choose your government. Here, the government is choosing the people. Who's the citizen? Okay, this is okay. What it can do? Well, the threat is obvious. If you are a poor or a Muslim, they can. I mean, how many people can prove it? And they say that if you have a ration card or they have different identity cards and so forth, that they don't qualify for you to prove that you're a citizen. Just like if driver's license here cannot. Driver's license, even your passport doesn't do it. So you have to bring up papers that you prove your grandparents were here. Well, so I would say half the Indian people don't have papers like that. Poor never have it. I mean, there's no tradition of keeping papers, and they move around. There are floods. There are people who live there, towns and villages. So, well, the Hindus don't feel as much. I mean, their idea was the Hindus won't feel as much because you can always say, we came as a refugee. You're a Hindu. Okay, yeah, you're a refugee. Okay, you're fine. You're expedited. So this is the way they can, basically what the Republicans try to do with blacks in this country. This is a wholesale attempt. Although they're saying, no, that's not our intent. No. But that's the threat. And the Muslims have realized it in India. That's why there's a tremendous movement going on. There's also something called National Population Register, which is associated with it, which was already in motion. NRC has not started, but National Population Register was there for a long time. The idea was to collect information locally so your services and things can be tailored, and health services and other things can be tailored. But now they have said it, although they're backing away from it, but people know that they're going to link it into the National Register of Citizens, and all of a sudden you are in their debt. So I will leave it alone. We can deal with it in question answers. I'll come to finally. So it is my claim that Hindutva is a fascist ideology, it's a fascist movement that BJP leads. The goal is complete corporate, but what's the goal? Goal is complete corporate domination of India. Okay. Now, because Dimitrov says, and I think many other Marxist scholars agree, that fascism comes to rescue the system when it is threatened. Now, the threat would come from movement of workers, but it can also come from the fact that you just can't manage the thing. Indian bourgeoisie is weak, and an Indian capitalist class wants to have a high rate of return. There are problems they cannot solve inside India. India did not become China, and so therefore there are all kinds of problems. And this fascist ideology is to grab the land, reduce the people, small business destroyed helps the big business, right? And so this is the kind of thing that goes on in the United States. Small business is being destroyed here too, okay? But this is a much greater threat in India. So there, spontaneous protests have erupted in university campuses. Homemakers and working women both Muslims and non-Muslims have occupied public spaces in bitter cold January. January is a pretty cold month. And temperature in my hometown went down to something like 2 degrees Celsius, which is very cold, close to freezing. And but they were staying there all day long, all night long, the women. And the question was, they were saying, well, the men don't want to come out; they're just sending their women. Men are, that kind of taunting is going on. But the women have taken the initiative because they see the threat now, the Muslims in particular. But the secular people know. Secular know, Muslims know, Dalits know, and all kinds of people who are not part of this fascist ideology know that. And only 37% votes went to BJP to elect them. Hindu vote was about 44%, so even majority Hindus are now with them. But that's how electoral politics is. You can come with that kind of situation. Okay, and in these meetings, preamble to the Indian Constitution is being read, the national flag is being waved, people are saying, Gandhi's photos are being carried, his favorite songs are being sung, food is being served by the Sikhs. Sikhs have a great tradition. They feed anybody. You go to a Sikh temple, 24 hours a day, I think it's 24 hours a day, maybe at night time they close, but anybody can go there. You don't have to belong to a prayer. They'll feed you with fresh food, vegetarian food. You sit down and eat. They are serving the food, okay? And they have even invited the Hindus who were driven out by Islamic insurgents in Kashmir, who the right wing says, well, you intellectuals never talk about them. Where is your secularism when all these Hindus were driven out from the valley? They were driven out, that's true. But so even they asked those Hindus to come and say, we're with you, our heart is with you. We think that was injustice. So the left has organized nationwide general strike. It was a one-day general strike. And journalists of the left in independent mind have used the internet media. That the mass media in India is corporate owned and privately owned. And they are siding with Modi, by and large. In fact, they have been called Godi media. Godi means lap media, like lapdog. But so there people are using all means, and opposition political parties are not the leaders of this movement, this spontaneous movement, okay? They are supporting it, but they are not leading it. Because for them, for one thing, they are also discredited with their association. And Congress party was playing soft Hindutva card too, and that kind of stuff. So therefore, this movement right now is spontaneous, people's movement, and it has its strength and weakness both. So I've been looking at all these newspapers as well as more videos in internet. There are a tremendous amount of those come out from independent media. So the masses are leading the movement, but we know the spontaneous upsurge of the masses can also dissipate or be crushed when its peak has passed by repression following a well-prepared provocation. Just like in Kashmir, I tend to think that was a provocation they created, but I can't prove it, so that's still outstanding. And unless an experienced political organization leads them, steals them in the ebb and flow of the struggle, Gandhi did that. Gandhi did on behalf of the Indian bourgeoisie, but he did that in India in the anti-colonial movement, 1915 to 1947. And Lenin did in Russia in the movement starting in 1903 all the way till he died. So that's my talk. I have actually finished it shorter time than I was afraid. Thanks to Alan, who keeps telling me move faster. Thanks, Alan.
Gene here. Right here.
Okay. Okay. I can't say that we always live up to this high standard that Raj has set.
No, we do.
On the whole, I think our programs are first rate, and we're one of the few places in the Bay Area, if not the world, where we not only talk about Marx, but we also do this from a non-sectarian way. We have Stalinists, we have Trotskyists, we have anarchists, we have Maoists, and also independent Marxist humanists, right? I wasn't trying to erase you there. But, so you see, we're a very diverse group. And the other feature of us is we don't get any money from any foundations. We don't ask for it, and in part, they wouldn't give us to us anyway. So we rely on you. We checked with our accounting department last week and found that as we're going right now, we will end the year roughly $1,232 in the red. So we need to make up that difference. So let me pass this around. Reach deeply into your pockets, please, and put money in there. Fill it up. And now, also, we're here every Sunday morning, 10:30 to 12:30. If you're not on our mailing list, I'll put a mailing list in back, and please sign up, and you'll get our weekly reminders. Next week, we have another excellent talk on the Haitian Revolution of 1804. Not many people realize the historical significance of this, but you will if you come next Sunday. So, we have all their money?
It's moving around.
We can proceed.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll get started with questions. You have 2 minutes.
No, I don't need that. I don't need.
Give it to Charlie.
Oh, Charlie.
You have 2 minutes for your question or comment. We'll move through the room rather than you don't have to hold your hand up because I'm going to go along the way. So I would like to start in the back for a change. So if you'd like to make a question or comment in the black and the pink there. Yes, you. Okay. Would you have anything to say? Okay.
Karen.
In the white hair? Yes?
No.
Okay. Would you like to speak? Okay, we're moving almost as fast as Raj spoke. So, I don't have anything.
That's mine. I forgot to turn them off. I'll do it. It can wait. Okay.
Okay, next. Yes, you.
Yeah.
Communist Party and the Marxists and the Maoists
were organizing in the forests amongst primitive peasantry and landless people for many, many years and became pretty powerful and were suppressed.
by the Indian government,
What the role of the Communist Party is?
both the Marxist-Leninist ones and the Maoist ones, and I think there's 3 or 4 others. What role have they played? Are they still as powerful as they
Do they have
Okay. Shall I answer that? Yeah, maybe I should answer that question. It's a pretty involved question. Yeah, CPIML, or what is known as nutshells. Is it? There's some echo? Okay. So there's a echo. There's echo. There's a feedback there. So the nutshell, what are known as nutshelites or nutshells, are the people who actually finally pushed back into. They were the ones who took the Maoist line of fighting from agricultural areas with poor peasants, and they tried to use the They try to take the state on with arms also. And the Mrs. Gandhi's government crushed them in Calcutta in 1971, using the Bangladesh war as a cover. And the tremendous bloodletting took place then. And now this government is going after them. And they have arrested, the Naxalite movement is very limited now. So that's why they ended up confined to only those areas, the more inaccessible areas where they have support base and all that. But Indian government has organized a counter gang sort of situation there against them, and the military too. So they take on the state with guns, and there have been that going on. But I think their strategy is failing. They are not backed by the CPIM and CPI, because these parties have basically decided you can't. This is not a revolutionary. Revolutionary is not. Moment is not here, and they don't fight that way. So, can you still hear me? Okay, sorry about that. So that's. They're pretty limited. In fact, somebody who spoke here, both father and son, they have a former wife of the person who spoke here has been put in detention. She's a lawyer. She did nothing of the sort, no guns or anything, never had, was organizing the back, people like that who are working in ancillary industries who are highly exploited. They come from those communities, just like here, some of them come to the towns to work. And she's been put in jail and for more than a year. So, and because BJP is going after them. In fact, they have a term called urban nukshals. So even if you write something in their support, arguing on the basis of constitution, you're in danger of being arrested and with trumped up charges and put behind bars. And we'll talk about law later. That kind of situation is going on.
Excuse me. Oh, okay. Let's no, we're moving that. Okay. Go ahead. Right. Your life speak.
Is this working? Thank you.
Closer.
Raj, I do get a good story, clear picture of what's happening. I'm totally fascinated by this model class that you're talking about, and it would be great to have a little, discussion, in that environment. So, what is this thing?
Sure. I plan to do a session on caste system of India here.
Hi, regarding that, I guess my big question is how much is caste still an operative sort of application? That, like I hear that they take that to streets that are saying from the very border areas. So how much is caste in general speaking sort of a big operative situation for Indian people?
Do you mean class versus caste? Yeah, right. So caste is definitely operative. People organize wedding. I mean, people marry within their caste, although there are in urban areas they sometimes marry outside. But traditional society, which is still runs the thing, is patriarchy is very much there. It's reduced, but it's very much there. And caste is actually strengthened by the electoral system, because people say, well, he's of my caste, so they can reach him for some favor or things like that, because it's kind of essentially like a clan system. Caste is like that, although caste is complicated. But there are modern elements that are emerging. For example, Dalits have a petty bourgeois, not quite a bourgeois, but petty bourgeois sections now, maybe even a few bourgeoisie. Among Muslims, there is less. Muslims have gone down because this prejudice against Muslims has been there, and RSS and all these organizations have, and private industry basically keeps the Muslims out from the hiring, which is what has grown in India.
Raj, the thing that really stuck out to me in what you said was how universal this moment is. That fascism is really emerging all over the world as the answer to fading capitalism all over the world. So the question to me is what places it. Clearly capitalism is failing everywhere. And the only answer they have is war, destruction. We are here because we want a different answer. So the question of what is socialism, what does society after capitalism look like, is the paramount question that needs to be addressed. And what is universal is the idea that people want to be free. They don't settle for anything. So it's true in India with the movement that you were describing. It's true in this country with people who are opposing Trump. With most of us were at the demonstration yesterday, trying to do that act on the idea, but the idea itself, what freedom means, that's really top order. And it's not just opposition to Trump. We can't be exhausted in having the State Department define who our enemies are. And put Soleimani on the same level as Che Guevara and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So the question of what is the idea of freedom is what Marxists bring to that. What really I feel needs to be explicitly addressed. How is Marxism reflected in that?
I think ultimately a communist society is the answer, but we can't get to the heaven from here quite in one leap. I wish we could. So I understand. For a long time you have articulated, and I think definitely ultimately we want a society in which all human beings have freedom, whose freedom actually depends on the other people who support that freedom. So I philosophically no disagreement with you. There may be some practical issues on which we can differ.
Thanks, Raj, for your help. I just wanted to know, is there any groups among the Indians in this country with substantial Indian population who are demonstrating something in solidarity with this spontaneous movement?
I think there are some, but for each one who's like that, 9 others are Modi supporters. At least 9. When Modi came here last time, Trump went to his lecture. It was in a football field, covered in a football field in Houston, called Howdy Modi. And Trump came, and he held Trump's hand up and saying, elect him. I mean, imagine. And then they are advertising in India, look how powerful this person is. He even helps the US president. He has to come there. So a lot of people from Gujarat who are here, they're the people, I would say a third, I don't know the percent, but there's a very high percentage of people from Gujarat here. And they see this like ethnic or regional association. They're also petty, bourgeois-minded people, and for them, this Modi, who sort of gives a shining veneer to India, which actually is going down very fast now in the international scene. So far, he had appealed to them. Now this can change with all that's going on. Those of us who will oppose it are there, but I would say they were less than 10% at this point.
In the United States, there were many complaints about false elections, illegal elections. Scholars have blamed them on the use of these machines. And we're reflecting to a paper now. the reason I mention that is India has done exactly the opposite. In 2004, they got rid of the balance and went to these machines, which are it's indetectable. You cannot challenge these machines. And so I wonder, your theory is based on what you're saying, that the votes that were taken represents what really happened. When there's a real possibility you're neglecting millions of votes that have been stolen. And what I worry about, we need to avoid these great, big, beautiful theories that get destroyed by some little ugly fact. And that little ugly fact is you might be talking about something that's not so. Because incidentally, there's a great deal of literature of complaints by Indian leaders about the stolen elections. You didn't refer to that at all. You're making the assumption it was honest. I think that's a mistake. Thank you.
I think that I'm aware of that issue, but BJP has also lost elections. After this major election, there have been several elections. They've lost many. So how much of a factor that is, it is difficult to. I know that this issue is very much there, and some people really believe it, others don't. I don't know how I can. I don't have any real grasp on it, but all I can say is BJP has also lost elections based on the same system.
Yeah. In what's happening in India, I mean, you were giving specifics, but it's also, as has been alluded to, part of an international trend: ethno-chauvinism, ethno-nationalism, ethno-religious nationalism. How much of it in India, for example, is directly a reaction, let's say, to neoliberalism and the forces it's imposed? Because, for example, on the left, we would try to indicate that there are systemic problems and give the causes the systemic nature. On the right, it's a much easier task. All you have to do is blame the other. And that has a lot of resonance with people. So how much of those kind of like neoliberal forces, I mean, is India also engaging in a kind of almost anti-neoliberalism that Trump is engaging in a sense of protectionism and new tariff stuff, and which actually becomes some sort of a threat to the free flow of goods worldwide? But how are those forces?
India traditionally has been tremendous amount of protection to its domestic industry. That's been its say. But in neoliberal change in 1991, they lifted some of that. And right now, consumer goods they are buying are Chinese made in India, just like as they're here. And I think what neoliberalism has done is that wealth inequality has grown tremendously in India, just like it is here. And the right is benefiting because right has basically defined that the left is not an alternative. After all, look at what China is doing. It's saying there's, well, okay, it's left in name only. It's a repressive government. That's how they argue. And they don't even have freedom, people. So basically their argument is that neoliberalism, if used properly and so forth, we will also get rich. But actually, so there's a tension in society because same family can have one person who's very wealthy, simply one sibling, the other sibling equally educated, doesn't make it. So there's a lot of tension in society. I think right wing is benefiting from all this because they have one single solution: nationalism. And the left has not been able to articulate its vision because its old vision seemed to have been defeated. And it hasn't come up with an alternative vision for which I think you're arguing in one kind, and then the others who are arguing differently.
Thank you very much for the
Sure.
presentation. And I don't have any questions.
This almost not was mentioned, but I just wanted to hear a little bit more, if you could, about the Kashi coin. because it seems that this may be a worldwide trend with cash. And so doing away with the cash economy means doing away with the illegal economy, as well as with the primary economy, as you say, agricultural products. What other ramifications?
I don't think I'm so knowledgeable to give you any definitive answer, but seems to me in India they've done two things. One is this demonetization. The other thing is they say everybody is to have a bank account. Even if you have no money, government saying you can open an account. The destruction of what I call natural economy is very harmful because that's how people lived and actually could survive with low incomes, But when everything is routed to corporation, there's so much sucking out of surplus. The very process, the banks, and everybody's hands in there. Okay, so the person who suffers is the producer, the little tiny producer, and the consumer. So the idea sounds good that you will have a efficient economy, but it's the capitalist economy you're generating, which is a disaster here. You can imagine what kind of disaster would be in a third world country like India. So I think this was sold as something that it isn't in India, and I think it's adding to that tension and pressure. And now people are seeing that Modi is doing something different than what he's talked about. So this movement, now this Modi and his BJP are getting discredited in some sections of society, Dalits and the Muslims and more people than before. So outcome is not known, but I don't know enough to be definitive or be very knowledgeable on that, your question.
It's on. Okay, it's on. Well, thank you, Raj. As expected, an excellent presentation with which I am in agreement. And I would, I see this as what's going on in India, as you discussed. It's clearly not just India. It's a global class struggle we're seeing. And we have groups like in Kerala and elsewhere where the communists have won significant parties. There's the comrades who walked with Arundhati Roy, and a lot of this going on there. I'm a little bit bothered by one of your last comments, and about where the right has been able to demonize China as a land where there is no freedom. And I think that just is a concept that will not bear serious consideration. And without going into it, I'll just note that, over 100 million Chinese leave China every year for tourism, education, business. Over 100 million go back to China. So clearly they like China. They want to be there. And so it's not the old class struggle in the days of the Soviet Union, but its underlying factors are still quite there. And I just want to know if you want to comment on this, or I would be interested.
No, I'd rather keep to this situation on India rather than a discussion on China. I was just reporting what happens. By the way, it's not only the right wing; it's also liberals who have that same view. Liberals talk the same way about China. Whatever the truth about China is, I think it's outside the scope of our present talk. So let's keep the focus on India and Modi's second term. Any other?
Is this okay? I spent December in India, and I went to a market in Kolkata, and the merchant took my credit card, and without my knowledge ran up over $3,000 in bogus withdrawals from my credit card. And I'm supposed to talk to the bank tomorrow about that after they talk with the merchant. And you have any recommendations on what I should tell the bank?
Well, I have used credit card. I haven't been to India for 3 years, but I used to go every year, and I use credit cards for dining, and we did very little purchase, but dining, etc. So yeah, I never had that problem. But once something similar happened to me, and I thought it happened in India, but I was told that it happened in Hong Kong while transiting. And so this scam, and they spent $3,000-4,000. And somebody was living luxuriously in a type 5-star hotel and eating well with that. But I never had to pay because my credit card said, okay, you're not responsible for it.
There's an old joke in the East Bloc, former East Bloc countries, that socialism is the transitional stage between feudalism and capitalism. And, there's a lot of evidence, empirical evidence that that's so. Forgive me for mentioning China again, but it seems to me that the big difference between China and India is that China actually made a revolution. And so it wiped out the old landlord class. It also was able to control the native bourgeoisie and so forth and so on. In India, that hasn't happened. And so the state is extremely repressive, but also inefficient. Corruption is everywhere. It's very difficult to get any kind of real modernization moving. And so I'm wondering whether or not you think that India is stuck, whether there's a way forward, what role the former communist parties might play, which, by the way, I think have been discredited because of their own neoliberal orientation, and so on.
Yeah, I largely agree with you. India needs a revolution. And Gandhi was very effective in wrapping up the peasantry on his side, even before the communists got out of diapers. You know, by 1925, Gandhi, in the first decade after returning from South Africa, had more or less wrapped up the entire Indian peasantry, poor peasants in particular, on his side. But that basically is the party of the bourgeoisie. And because it was a National Liberation Front, it was a broad front, even the communists were outside of it, but they did not want to be seen as against this struggle. So they were caught unawares. I mean, first of all, they made mistakes, and they were very... but communists in India made tremendous sacrifices for the nationalist movement. I say per capita, they did the most. I mean, if you look at the small size, how much sacrifices they make. And Kashmir, in particular, came to India partly because of their work. You know, so communist work in India, even the CPI, tremendous contribution, but they made mistakes. And about neoliberal, they were not for neoliberal, but they acquiesced to it. And the problem is that nowhere in the world has communist parties that are capitalist countries where have succeeded in getting mass support. I mean, look at the United States. We have communist parties, but how many workers support it? It's a problem.
I was wondering about the role of international capital in this transition that Modi is leading. In other words, it seems to me he's opening up the country for more and more exploitation by international capital. Is that also part of what's going on here, or are they trying to keep international capital? You mentioned that the bourgeoisie of India is relatively weak. Is that a major issue right now?
I think so, yes, I agree. I think first, when he came to power in 2014, Modi wanted to make land saleable much more easily. In India, selling agricultural land is not so easy. This is part of land reform. They were trying to prevent big landlords acquiring land and so forth, or corporations. So there were a lot of restrictions that came from the movement. And just like even Lenin was going for petty bourgeois land reform early on, right? It gave it to land to the peasants. After all, that generates petty bourgeois. But then Stalin then reverses it after period of time, and both, in my opinion, were doing the right thing because this is by stages. Now in India, the land reform created petty bourgeois peasantry by and large, and that's part of the reason why the Naxalites did not succeed. That's the difference between China and India. The petty bourgeoisie was created, even if you're a small piece of land, if you own it, the person thinks differently. So, but yeah, Modi wanted to privatize it, and the left and the progressives and the peasants all pushed him back on that. And so he wants to privatize India's economy. So part of this movement that he has by splitting society is to make neoliberalism reach its ultimate objective, which is privatize everything. I mean, Indian Railways is one of the largest industries, certainly employs the largest number of people by any industry in the world, okay, among those. They have introducing private trains. The tracks are government owned, stations are government owned, but they're introducing these high priced, luxury trains, which is, and so steps towards all these things are taken. They want to sell Air India because it makes loss. So nobody's buying them, but that's the world situation. So yeah, this is related to, and the Indian bourgeoisie is weak. They want ability to do more higher level of exploitation. The global capital will come when this becomes more easy for them. In China, Chinese Communist Party did it for the capitalist class in the United States, but they also protect the workers somewhat. So it's a different story. I don't want to get into comparing China, but in India, that's I think ultimately this will not emerge as a fascism like Germany and Italy, but it's a fascist method. It's some kind of fascism. But those are the things that I think it's aiming to do.
Okay, if you want to speak, raise your hand and we'll call on you. Especially on your reference to those who haven't. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was just in Lucknow. I was on a fellowship to India.
That's my hometown.
I know you said that, and oh, what a wonderful city! Anyway, I met a lot of professors there, and they were very open about their criticism of Modi, and so I'm really curious to know what happened with the assassination of the professors you mentioned.
Those were not in my home state. They were elsewhere. One was a woman journalist, very courageous. She was killed outside her home, shot by somebody. Nobody knows. There was a guy who wrote history of Maharashtra, the western state, and how they glorify this one particular person by name Shivaji because he fought against the Mughals, and the historian clarifies that this is not about Hindu versus Muslim. It was, and both sides had Muslims and Hindus fighters and all that, and they didn't like it. They killed him. And he was a very, very distinguished, respectable historian.
How long ago?
This is Modi's first term. Oh. And the cow vigilantism, where they lynched a Muslim man to death by accusing him that he has got beef in his refrigerator. And beef is not allowed to be sold in my home state. It was in my home state. And it's, this is a very interesting thing. India is one of the largest exporters of beef.
I didn't know that.
You know that? And beef is only allowed in certain coastal states, in certain areas. In Bombay, you can order beef and you can eat it. I don't know if you can right now, but in my home state, which has a large Muslim population, more than average, it's around 20%, beef is not allowed. That's from 1950 onwards, because the Hindu sentiments are that cow is sacred and that kind of stuff. So nobody violates it. But this was the acquisition. This is basically the fascist gang killed him, and it was led by a BJP leader. And later on, a BJP leader was giving credits to those who did another lynching. And he happens to be the son of a very respected BJP minister who's left the party and is speaking against Modi. So all this is going on.
Okay. I had a couple questions. One, the BJP has they've invoked the memory of Ambedkar as somebody who supported a uniform civil code. And apparently that's highly questionable, but I just wondered if you could comment on what the BJP means and what their intentions are with the Uniform Civil Code. And then also in Jammu and Kashmir, the referendum that was supposed to be held back in 1948 but never has, is that something that would ever be feasible to move ahead with?
Both are complicated questions you asked.
Yeah.
Okay, so bear with me a little, take a little time to explain. Now, in this Uniform Civil Code, in India, the Muslims have Muslim Personal Law, okay? Muslim Personal Law Board, which basically they say you can follow your customs. You're not allowed to have more than one wife. That's true. In Indian Constitution is supreme. So you cannot have more than one wife. But they had a prevalent thing. They have, the Muslim marriage is not like Hindu marriage. In Hindu marriage, you're married, you're not only married for this life, for many other lives. So you're completely committed, okay? They say you're born again and again. Now, nobody checks whether that happens. But Muslim marriage is actually a contract. You can get out of contract. Both women and men can get out of the contract. But women being in a weaker position, oftentimes homemaker, which is traditional society, and that's true of Hindus also, but maybe percentage-wise a little more than Muslims. But the thing is, they started this corrupt practice of triple talaq. The original divorce law was among the Muslims was pretty progressive. He said a man cannot divorce his wife. Since it's a contract, you can end it, okay? Right. But the contract, you have to give 3 notices to your wife if you're a man. The woman also has a reverse, but I don't know the details. So it's called something else. There's a slightly different procedure. So the man, he's often the one who divorced because he takes on another woman and he just tells her to get out of the house because if you divorce, you leave my house. I own this house. And that has to do with who owns the house. Oftentimes it's the man who owns the house. And that comes from patriarchy. So this puts a woman in a very terrible situation, dependency, and she's scared. And then they developed this practice. So the original Muslim law was, you tell her, I'm going to divorce you. Okay, I don't think any married person has been there in the United States or anywhere who has not heard from one spouse that I'm going to divorce you, but never gets carried out, or gets carried out far fewer times, right? Then it's said. Now he says it one time, and then he has to wait for 1 more month, and he has to give the reason. So, for example, if she put too much salt in the dal or whatever they made, she can correct it, or the meat was overcooked, burned, or something. Now, the second time is 1 month later. He says again. He gives the reason. You haven't corrected, I divorced you. Still no, she still gets the second chance. So the third time is after that. So 2 months, if he says third time, then it's divorce, okay? And in the meantime, they tried reconciliation. You go to the priest or whoever and neighbors, and they try to intercede and so on and so on. So this was reasonable for society. But then it became corrupted. And it became a practice. They serve 3 times at the same sitting, and you're out. Okay? So the civil court was saying, well, look, this is unjust. And so they moved it. Now this is illegal now in India. This again, Modi brought this thing because he has a majority. And he said our Muslim sisters were oppressed. Okay, this is how one. But now they have done what they have done is that if anybody reports a man has set the talaq 3 times to a woman, anybody, because they say often woman is too afraid to say it. So anybody in the neighborhood, agent could do it. Okay, they will come and pick you up and put you in jail first. The man. She wouldn't even have a support because he doesn't have a job. And then there will be a court and there will be presentation and so forth. So it emasculates the Muslim male. I mean, this is a fine way for them. Again, this is a Hindu domination agenda. So this is the unit behind the civil code. It sounds very reasonable, but the intent is very, very much a Hindu domination intent. So that's that issue. There's much more to it, but I'll keep it short to that. Now about Kashmir. Yeah, it was Kashmir accession was an interesting thing because the king was Hindu. Majority of Jammu Kashmir's residents, by 75% to 25%, were Muslim. And the British set the rules for division. When finally it was decided, in both sides accepted division will take place, the rules were if its state is ruled by a king or a prince, then he gets to make the decision which state they join, Pakistan or India. But if the population didn't want that, there will be a referendum. And this is what happened in Junagadh. The king of Junagadh wanted to accede to Pakistan. The population was Hindu. And the Congress party said, we're going to have a referendum. Referendum went against it. So Junagadh stayed with India. Now, this obviously should happen here. Okay? So it was going to happen, and nobody could prevent it. It was a set of rules. I mean, there was not independent, British ruled it. But what Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan was formed at this point, and Jammu Kashmir's king sat undecided. Because being a Hindu was afraid of joining Pakistan, which is a Muslim-dominated state. He knew that that's not going to be very good. Staying with India, he was hesitating because he was a feudalist and Congress party was bourgeois. They had land reform, so the future of king was not certain. So he said, everybody signed a standstill agreement. And so they signed it, but then Jinnah, they said Jinnah was not behind it, but Pakistani army organized volunteers to liberate Kashmir, our brothers. So these were tribesmen from Northwest Frontier. They came, they almost overwhelmed the state's ragtag military. At that point, his hand was forced. The king then asked said, okay, come and defend it. Nehru said, we have no treaty with you for defense. You're on your own because you haven't signed this little instrument. So he signed it, came to India. So, but by that time they had occupied 1/3 of Jammu and Kashmir state. So it went to United Nations. The United Nations said Pakistan has to withdraw its forces. India will control it. Then there will be a plebiscite, referendum. Pakistan never vacated. India said we don't have to have it because they didn't meet their part of the bargain. That's the story. Well, I think Modi will bring India closer to the United States, but Trump has not been so friendly either. You know, they've basically put a lot more, what do you call it, tariffs and sanctions on, you know, he wants to put pressure on Modi to reduce the tariffs in India. And then, so therefore, Modi is kind of forced to balance the powers, which has always been India's foreign policy. Weak nations try to balance, and that's what he's doing. he's done it clumsily, but he and Xi Jinping seem to get along okay, and but China basically takes the side of Pakistan on every issue. For example, in Kashmir, he wants to bring it to the United Nations, which was not agreed to by United States and France. They vetoed it. They said, no, you can't do that. So it's a kind of a game of diplomacy. But India is trying to balance. Besides, China is too big in terms of economic relations also. So if India falls completely into U.S. Camp, it will harm itself. So I think it's a muddled situation. That's the best I can tell you.
Strike. Say a little bit about that in terms of a positive example of how the working class resistance to the capitalist offensive against the people.
Yeah, the strike was about a month ago or so. It was in about a month ago. It was in December sometime. It was a one-day strike, nationwide strike. Indian working class size is 540 million, but that includes everybody, and unionized Indian workers are only 7%. Those are part of unions. That doesn't mean the rest are not organized, but they're not organized under unions. I have heard participation of about 125 million in that one-day strike, but I actually haven't heard as much as I thought I would. And the strike was not that effective because, like banking is heavily unionized in India because government-owned banks are the largest number of banks. So it was very effective. CPIM organizes those workers. But they put in supervisory staff and kept a lot of branches open. So the impact was not that much. I think they are they had this on the agenda, the opposition to this Citizens Amendment Act. I cannot tell you, I haven't been able to find out how much of an impact it has, how they interacted with others. I think the left doesn't have a effective strategy as of now, from what I can see.
Anybody else who has thoughts? Okay, then we'll go to the second round.
Yes, you talked about the sociology of the demonstrations against the Modi government, made up of Muslims, secularists, even some Hindus. Can you talk about the politics of this movement against the Citizen AA and the National Registry? Is the Congress Party involved? Is it going to get stronger? Are Social Democrats involved? Are the Communist parties of India involved in these big demonstrations against the Modi government?
First of all, I think the politics of this is basically social democratic. Largely it's Muslims, but it has, for example, college campuses have a lot of Hindu involved in it, because even the Muslim universities where the police went and beat up the students, which is against, you can't enter a campus in India without the permission of the president of the university. They violated that. They went in. They went to the library, and they went to the bathroom students, women students. They dragged them out, and this was at Jamia Millia, which is a Muslim university, but almost half of it is Hindu students. So it's founded by Muslims, but it's like that. Same thing, Aligarh Muslim University, which is a very old university, second oldest university, I think, in India. I think may not be second, but it's a very old university, and a very reputable university. Same thing. Half the students roughly are non-Muslims. They did the same thing. And they do provocations also so that they can enter. They will have somebody will throw something or little fire is lit somewhere, and who knows who did it. And they do this. They're trying to do this provocation of these women's thing, where somebody speaks and we'll separate Assam, and then all of a sudden the issue is, well, they're asking about division of India. So there is this old thing is the patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel kind of a thing. That's what these are. The guys are scoundrels. So that now as the Communist Party and other parties involved, they are supporting it, but they are not in the front. First of all, many of them are discouraged. Not the Communist Party so much. Communist parties are not considered corrupt. They are considered corrupt ideologically in the sense that they have compromised. The other parties are corrupt materially. In other words, their leaders fill up their pockets through government contracts and other things. So they're known to be corrupt. And by the way, that is true of BJP too. But nobody arrests them now because of their government. In fact, that's the best reason why people leave other parties to join them, because you will not be, caught. Otherwise they are trying to arrest them and saying, well, we're cleaning up corruption. But basically they're trying to scare the other parties. So they're not involved. It's basically a civil rights kind of situation in which they are reading India's constitution. They're carrying Gandhi's portraits, singing Gandhi's time songs of all religions and all that. So it's basically saying it's an opposition to what people feel is a threat to a lot of people, that they will become non-citizens and put in the detention camp. By the way, they have established detention camps in India. And these detention camps have 10 feet high walls. And the first three deaths, among the first three deaths are people, two of them were Hindus in the Northeast. They died after a year of detention, bad conditions, Nobody killed them, but they just died because they are uncared for. And these detention centers are being built all over the place. Every state they're building it. So you can imagine the amount of threat people. I mean, you don't have to be a Muslim to feel threatened. If you're poor, where are you going to find the paper? What paper? I mean, I don't have a birth certificate myself. I got naturalized in the United States, by the way, this last week. And I have to tell Gene, the largest number of people who got naturalized were Chinese, by the way. Are they going back? I don't think so. Those were not going back. And the second largest was Mexicans. The third was Indians. India and China, of course, makes sense because they're the largest number of people. But
will these demonstrations affect the percentages in the parliament after the next election?
I think so, if there is a next election. That is also I think there will be a next election, but people have gone to the point of saying, will there be a next election? Kind of like what people worried about Trump. I think there will be a next election. The whole point here is, rather than the ballot box manipulated by the electronic voting, the ideological attack on that is going on, that what has happened in India, just like the word socialism is now become, what is socialism? If China is socialist, with all the capitalist production there, and Gene has given a lecture which says, okay, is the party of the proletariat ruling, so therefore, now socialism is now a question of what is socialism. It's a very diluted definition, because in Lenin's time it's clear that you cannot have private enterprises. In Soviet Union, private enterprises were less than 1%. Okay, and now secularism this is what they have done to the word secularism in India. They have diluted it, and they're saying the people who are Hindus are really secularists because we include everybody. So if I let you live there, you're a Christian, I'm a secularist. You can live here. No, I don't object. And even in the courts, they have diluted this. And this wasn't the intent of the court. But, this is how this movement has come to be. People like me, if I go to India, they'll say, you're pseudo-secularist. You're not a real secularist. Because if you're a real secularist, you will stand for Hindus who actually are so tolerant. The fact that, it's totally wrong doesn't occur to them, or this is propaganda. But the weakening of the word secularism. First of all, secularism was very difficult to be practiced in India, which is a society which was highly religious. No matter which religion you are, even Christian are more serious about Christianity in India than they are in the United States as a whole. They're all very sincere. So the word has been diluted and intentionally done by these people. So that's part of the ideological struggle of the right-wing Hindutva people.
My second favorite subject. That's also universal. I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that women are leading some of the struggle, right? So I wanted to provide a little bit more context, and maybe you can expand on it some more. This is both Pakistan and India. In Pakistan, in March 2019, this is, by the way, from the current issue of News and Letters. In March 2019, massive demonstration in Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad were groundbreaking, and most signs and chants spoke to ending violence against women, including end to violence, I pledge to stop acid attacks, I pledge to stop honor killings, and we are not punching bags. So, Pakistan. In India, women were in the streets once again protesting the brutal gang rape and murder. In December, a lawyer in Jharkhand,
Yes.
okay, and a 6-year-old child in Rajasthan were raped and murdered. An Indian woman who had been raped was set on fire by her rapist and his friends while on her way to testify against him.
That's in South India, yeah.
She died the next year. In India, an average of 92 women are raped each day. Okay, so women are not just a minor term or something that will happen after. The question of women's liberation really is society's liberation. And it's certainly, India has a really long tradition of women standing up and fighting, if you want to expound on it.
Yeah, actually, I have to point out that the woman who was president of young woman, 22, 23, 24, in JNU, whose head was actually hit with an iron rod, he was bleeding profusely, taken to emergency by these goons. And she was hit not because of being a woman, but because it's a left wing, right? So by the right wing goons. Came back and is fiery. I mean, she's even more fiery than before. And so women who are in these gatherings, all day, all night, are sitting there. They are taking charge. And in India, the women have been activists for a long time, more and more. So now the threat is, yes, women are definitely will have to be a bigger factor even than even before. And they are realizing that even the right wing says, okay, mother, see, women are sacred for us. I mean, they put mothers, but you have to be a mother. You have certain way you are defined, which is basically within the definition of patriarchy. And the women are saying, hell no, we're not going to be part of that. So I think what has started in India is a civil rights movement, but just like instead of right-wing fascism, it may end up being a revolution the other way. That possibility exists in India now. I was very depressed about a month ago about all this, but since that time, I'm starting to see that the government is denying we ever intended to bring the National Register of Citizens. One person speaks one way, one other. Even Modi is saying, oh, we never talked about it. His own Home Minister, #2 guy, is saying, we're bringing it in Parliament. And Modi said, we never talked about it. I mean, you can see how the complete lies. And but the fascists are known for lies, right? There's the big lies of their thing. So anyway, yeah.
One of the dimensions that is so universal is what Ashok was saying before, this capitalism's turn to this vile nationalism and hatred of the other and this neo-fascism, and it's created millions of refugees in these sectarian wars. But on the other hand, there's another total collapse going on, that's the environment. And I wondered if you had any comments on the inability of Indian capitalism to confront this question like capitalism everywhere, and if there's any activity on that front.
When I came to this country it was 66, and it's about 67, 68, they had coined the term smog. Okay, that was LA. Okay, today out of 100 most polluted cities in the world, 80 are in Asia, and more are in India than in China. But 80 of them are in Asia, but primarily China and India. China is cleaning up some. So India, last time I went there, it was hard to see blue sky anywhere in the areas I traveled a lot, 1,000 miles around, I couldn't find it. Pollution of the water is tremendous. The rivers are dying. One of my professors who actually looked after me when I came as a young student at the institute, idealist, a person who became very prominent in ecology, especially water ecology. And he went on a fast and died after 109 days of fast. And the government basically paid nothing but lip service. In fact, he died when they tried to force feed him. And they overdid something, and his balance and thing, sodium balance, he may have lived a few more days. So this is government is allowing this neoliberalism, and growth requires complete disregard of nature. And in India, as it is, even before they started it, there was a problem. It's gotten much worse. So yeah, this is a very big disaster in India. I basically don't want to go there in winter, because the winter in this condition is the worst.
Anyone else? You have 5 minutes to review your votes, and then we'll pass on to you.
Gene, I think Gene wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, I just would look at my emails. I remember I got an email a couple days ago I was going to send to you about a protest Indian anti-Muslim bill that's supposed to be taking place right now, I think in North Beach in San Francisco. Do you know about that?
Yes, I know about that. In fact, those people who were there at the demonstration yesterday, there was a South Indian contingent. It was very small, but 10 or 12 people. I talked to them, and I told them I was speaking, and they said, well, we are going to be at that place. So I said, let's connect. Yeah, there's a demonstration.
Remember that.
Yeah, there needs to be bigger and bigger demonstration at the Indian consulate and embassies.
Okay, we have one more once.
Go ahead.
So I had a question I've been thinking about, actually way before today, and that is, well, I used it on my wife last night when I was trying to edge her towards coming today, and didn't work. And then I've noticed over the last half an hour that I didn't have to ask my question, because despite your resistance, everybody's asking little parts of my question. It's great, and it's all about China and India. And actually, my question specifically is that I love to say when I start talking about China with people, not a whole lot, but just here and there and off and on about anything. And a lot of times I'll punctuate the question, the statement, whatever, with anybody that kind of puts me off. Oh, China, who's everybody talking about? China is roughly 1.4 billion people, a fourth of the people of the world. I don't know, it keeps changing. And I said, it doesn't matter whether you think it's important or not. It's still important to the people of the world. I don't care, socialism, capitalism, whatever. And then we get into the discussion. And so recently I've learned, probably since your last presentation, roughly somewhere around there, when I'm getting more interested in how little I know about India. And it's also roughly about 1/4 of the people of the world, right next door.
1.3 billion.
1 point, point one, point whatever. Probably about what you call it, margin of error. So anyway, my point is that I don't really care, you know, if you're interested in politics or not. It's still a core of the people of the world. Now, obviously, very different histories, even though they're right next door to each other, and very different claims to the type of government and what they're doing to reform, or what they're not doing, or what kind of chaos they're into, and all kind of stuff. So, see where my question was going originally. A lot of what we've been talking about around this is come out. Well, great. I don't know if that's my questions anymore. So, but you see what I'm saying? I'm just reasserting my question in the way I was, just to say it. But to me, when I got that population, that one single number of 1/4 of the people of the world, I thought, oh my God, and I don't know anything about it. We got to learn more. So
Okay.
you get the implication of what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, both China and India are important for people of the world to know about and to have sympathy with the struggle of the people. One thing I want to point out, which is not related directly to your question, is that India is quite different than China, even China, and definitely all European nation states. China has Han people are vast majority. I think, if I'm not mistaken, almost 90%. Okay, in Europe, most of these nation states are people of one ethnicity, language, and religion primarily, and they're minorities, but they're small. India is completely different. India has, there is a religiously very diverse, ethnically diverse, linguistically diverse. So the idea that Hindutva, which are also, by the way, they're pushing one language, which they can't quite do, but they're trying to. Hindi, which is my language, which I'm opposed to becoming so dominant, along with any dominant idea. So India has to be, and was formed as a tolerant society in which all people of all religious faiths and ethnicities and ideas can coexist with the idea that there is unity in diversity. That's the principle Gandhi said, and this is really the only practical principle. This is aside from the issue of socialism and non-socialism. No matter what kind of society, you have to be tolerant. Otherwise, what will happen? It will be an unlivable place, which is what these people are doing, becoming unlivable. I have to go there. I haven't been there for some time. I plan to go there this year, and we'll see what the difference. But my friends tell me it's really nasty. I mean, these are urban friends of mine. Because of this, not because how people were, but there's sufficient amount of ill will generated by this movement, right-wing movement.
This is just something you will cover. And I have asked before, but I just sort of if you had to kind of make a generalization of caste versus class, I guess you have to think of how much people can overcome caste. I guess you mentioned some educational opportunities. How much is caste, if you had to just sort of look at it broadly in India, versus class, a situation that really is definitive in someone's life?
It's the most difficult question of all questions that is asked. And let's wait for when I talk about caste. But there is correlation between caste and class in India, even to this day. For example, among Dalits, and now Muslims are actually worse off than Dalits as a whole. Muslims, the religion, okay? The Muslims are not supposed to have caste. By the way, caste runs into all religious things, even Sikhs were not supposed to have caste. It was a reform movement against casteism. Still, people observe caste. In Pakistan, the Muslims observe caste. And so the caste is a very tenacious, it's kind of like the habit of smoking. You know? Anyway.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you if you know these professors that I met on Trump now? One was Saeed Akhtar Abbas, he's like a specialist. And then the other is Sikh. They're not.
Vernon.